Time on this 4th day of August 2023. Here are some of the stories that our reporters are working on currently.
Tonight,
deduct all these accrued funds from the salary of the employee who was not whose levy was not deducted because they enjoyed a court order.
the Law Society of Kenya moves to court seeking to block the implementation of the Finance Act 2023.
We have documented at least 24 cases of death, and 41 people experienced serious injury.
Human rights groups now say they will sue the Inspector General of Police following cases of extrajudicial killings witnessed in the country. And police in Kisumu have discovered 4 graves at a church compound as they launch a probe into the matter.
Well, those are the stories that you can expect at 9 p.m. on TV47 Weekend Edition. But right now, my colleague George Maringa with a big conversation with the ICC Prosecutor Karim can have a look.
We want to welcome you to this one-on-one exclusive and candid conversation with the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, that is the ICC, Karim Khan, who joins us for this candid conversation on TV47. Thank you so much, prosecutor, for joining us.
George, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be sitting down with you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And first of all, most Kenyans will remember you, of course, during your time as the defense lawyer in the Kenyan case. And they could be wondering what brings you to Kenya this time. So what's up?
Well, I love Kenya. Firstly, I think when I go to a country and I live in a country, one must be rather heartless if you don't build bonds of affinity with the people of a country, and this is certainly the case in Kenya. But I've been honoured by Mount Kenya University that tomorrow there's a convocation in which the students of Mount Kenya University are graduating, and the Chancellor and the Chairman and the board have been exceptionally generous and have decided to confer on me an honorary doctorate. And so it was a good opportunity to come to accept that and say a few words about the role of justice in the ICC. And that's why I'm here.
Brilliant. How does that make you feel?
Well, humbled. I mean, it shows the greatness of Kenya. I don't have the honor of being an African by nationality. I don't have the honor of holding a Kenyan passport. And yet they've been so generous to honor me as an outsider. And I think this is one of the very great qualities of Kenyans. They have very big hearts. And this is something I've seen in all parts of Kenya. People, every time I've been here, and I've lived here in this country, I've been all over this wonderful land. People from all communities have been invariably kind and generous to me. And this is why it's a wonderful opportunity to come back.
Indeed. And, you know, most of your interaction with Kenyans back then was in the defense. You're now prosecutor, the prosecutor of the ICC. How was that twist, first of all, for you as a person?
Well, for me, it's a different challenge, but it's not a really abrupt change because I started off in England as a prosecuting lawyer. I was a senior Crown prosecutor. I was the first member of the English bar recruited to the Yugoslav tribunal back in 96, 97. And so in that system, we prosecute and we defend in the common law system. And always I try to act on the side of justice. So the main principle is that whether you're a judge or a prosecutor or a defense counsel, act with integrity, act with courage, and act with the realization you're a servant of something much bigger than yourself. It's an officer of the court. And I think if that principle is kept at the forefront of every lawyer's mind anywhere in the world, then the wheels of justice can move effectively and gain the confidence of people. And so it's been, of course, a transition to deal with the management side of the office, to try to reform the office, to bring about the necessary change that is needed. But it's an opportunity I went into with my eyes open, and we're making good progress, inshallah.
When talking about progress, the ICC issued our arrest warrants against the president of Russia, that is Vladimir Putin, and that is something that, of course, came in as breaking news across the world. How is the ICC intending to effect this?
Well, the independent judges of the ICC reviewed the warrant application that I filed. They agreed with the assessment of the office that the standard of evidence was sufficient to issue a warrant, and so that warrant has the quality now of a judicial order. I'm trying my best, and I've given an undertaking, God willing, that we will not be bringing cases that are not strong. This is the time when we have to show international justice is not hot air and false promises. There's a foundation to it, and I believe there was a foundation to this application. It compelled me to move in the direction that I have, and now it's for us to make sure that we keep doing our job in all situations of the world, because every human life matters equally. In the last few weeks, I've been in Bangladesh because look at the plight of the Rohingya. I've been in the DRC. Look at the terrible suffering, 5 or different conflicts in one country of the DRC. I've been in Venezuela. I've been in Guatemala. I've been in Colombia. So we're not a one-situation court. Okay. We have to try to do better for people around the world that believe that their lives matter, because they do. And we have to talk less and deliver more. And I think that's the change I'm trying to bring about with the deputy prosecutors and the men and women of the office, an office that is trying to deliver in very concrete ways based upon strong evidence and thorough, rigorous, non-political investigations. And I think if we do that, we've done our job quite effectively.
Prosecutor, how would the arrest, say, of someone like Putin and other world leaders go about, or how does the ICC then? Because one would wonder, because the arrest warrant has been issued, but then how do you get them to arrest the said person?
This is a wonderful topic that we could take hours about. I think for your viewers, let's just look at this. At the moment, of course, Russian Federation is a permanent member of the Security Council. These are very serious countries that have very respected places in the international community. I have great respect for the role of the Russian Federation as a founding member of the UN Charter, as a permanent member of the Security Council. But the law must apply as effectively as possible, as far as possible. And I think people that thought justice is impotent, we have examples. Look at Jean Kabanda next door in Rwanda. He was found guilty. He was a former prime minister. Look at Charles Taylor. People thought when he was the president of Liberia, he could never be arrested. He's in Durham prison in the United Kingdom. Look at Milosevic and Kradich and Mladic. There's many other examples. So look at Key Sampan in Cambodia. Our job is to try to work with states, realizing that the ICC is a court of last resort, that the basic principle is trials and justice is done at home. Locally, that's what I prefer. Work with partnerships with countries, with regional organizations. But if there's no justice, if there is no determined effort to vindicate the rights of the most vulnerable, the youngest children, the most vulnerable boys and girls and women and men, the old and the sick, then international standards must try to apply in this very imperfect world as effectively as possible. And that's what we have to do. And then the enforcement. Nothing is static. The world is orbiting, all the time around the sun. Planets are in constant momentum and movement. We do our job, and then we see what happens later on.
Prosecutor, talking about doing your job, you've been to several African countries, I believe, and a cry or a calling that has been made by most African leaders is that they feel targeted by the ICC. Does the Rome Statute provide a situation where it sort of quote-unquote favors the West and quote-unquote oppresses the African leaders because they have cried that they feel more targeted in the court?
There's a lot of noise that is generated in these discussions, and the challenge for your viewers and for all of us is to not get deviated by the noise, but to hear the truth of the situation. Now, as humanity, we are a work in progress. There is a simple reality that there are 5 great powers that hold vetoes in the United Nations. That's a fact. Kenya does not have a veto. Pakistan, India do not have vetoes. They're not even permanent members of the Council, and the list goes on. But within this imperfect, evolving system that we have, we need to apply the law more effectively. Now, when it comes to Africa, look at where we are. I've opened investigations in Venezuela, in the Philippines. We're looking at the Islamic State, Khorasan, and Taliban in Afghanistan. I've applied for warrants that were issued in Georgia. We have an investigation, and judges have issued warrants in Ukraine. These are not African countries. And of course, the argument goes beyond that, because before Rwanda, before the Rwandan tribunal, we had the Yugoslav tribunal. These were not African countries. Cambodia is not an African country. And in the majority of situations that the court is active in the continent, they've been referred by the states themselves. There are these exceptions, the Article 15 prior motor powers that the previous prosecutors have used. But I think in my term already, we're trying to build more partnerships with Africa. I've been invited after a gap of 17 years to the last 2 African Union heads of state summits in Addis Ababa. I've just come from the Association of Caribbean States in Guatemala with the GRULAC, the Latin American and Caribbean group. So we're trying to build partnerships everywhere, and I'm trying to create a dynamic in which it doesn't matter if it's me that's the prosecutor or it's the ICC's flag that's behind a judge. We have to find partnerships so the national authority can do better, and regional authorities, regional organizations, whether it's the East African Community or ECOWAS or any other organization, SADC, they can actually take their role as respected international entities to make sure that there's a greater protection for more of humanity from these worst violations, because what we're dealing with is not politics, actually. Everything is in a political environment, but which of your viewers would support or try to defend genocide or war crimes or crimes against humanity? This continent has felt it more than any other in recent times, because we just had the commemoration of the Rwandan genocide. That was next door. And in 100 days, 700,000-800,000 people were butchered. So these are African values. Rome Statute principles are African values, and I think this is also something we need to underline. The fight for justice, Kenya has a very important and proud role to applaud itself. Look at from independence. Yeah. It was the fight, the struggle, the demand for equality. No white highlands anymore. No apartheid, no yoke of colonialism keeping people down. But a principle, as the US Constitution says, that we believe in these basic inalienable rights, that all men and women are created equal. And the Rome Statute system that now I have the responsibility of leading in terms of prosecution has to build these partnerships, and I think that's what we're trying to do.
Indeed. Then one would wonder the procedure of, one, protection of witnesses at the ICC, and secondly, procedure of collection of evidence, because you've said, for instance, for the Russian case, you want to come with a watertight case before the judges. If you could just explain in a nutshell the protection of witnesses at the ICC.
I have a fundamental responsibility, and as does the court, to ensure the protection of witnesses that are working with the court, and we have those protective measures. But this is, of course, in all situations, given that my basic premise that all human life matters equally in any part of the world. This is something that is as important for the Rohingya as for the people of Sudan, as for the people of Ukraine. When people speak the truth, they have a right not to be targeted with reprisals because they speak the truth, because they believe they own justice as much as anybody else, and I believe with them. I believe them on that issue. I find common cause with them on that because it's the truth. What I've said even before I became prosecutor is one needs to have a very close scrutiny about the quality of evidence you present. Before I apply for warrants, I will make sure that the assessment is that we have a reasonable prospect of conviction. There's been reports and there's been studies. It's nothing that's confidential. The previous way was a lot of reliance on testimonial evidence. We now have many other data streams, your phone, Facebook, Twitter, satellites, different types of communication and evidence is available, and we need to ingest all of them. And that applies whether it's for the Rohingya or Sudan, or whether it's for events taking place in real time in Ukraine. And this is something that law enforcement in Kenya also is dealing with. We're dealing with a very dynamic world with exponential change in the use of technology, and any investigator worth his or her salt and any prosecutor trying to bring the best evidence to the judges has to find a way to get access to the best evidence.
The situation in Sudan, Kenya has, of course, expressed its views. Will the ICC be coming in to look at the situation in Sudan?
We are. We've been looking at the situation in Sudan, and my first mission as prosecutor was to Sudan. I met General Burhan and Hemeti, and also former Prime Minister Hamdok, because I met them before the coup. I signed new agreements, there were new promises. And after the coup of September 2021, of course, things have become much more difficult. The latest flare-up in violence is a matter of real concern. I gave my last report to the Security Council in New York last month, and I also made it very clear that whilst I do not want these Security Council referrals, the Sudan situation was referred by the Security Council in 2005. I don't know, were you at school in 2005? Huh? Still in school, can you imagine? And now a new generation are born, and they are encountering the suffering that their parents had encountered. And this is because of many things, but also because we brushed justice under the carpet. There wasn't a collective will to ensure Sudan cooperated with its international obligations. There was a failure, I think, of the Security Council that made the most consequential determination it can make, namely that the situation in Darfur represents a threat to international peace and security. But when those words were uttered and the ball was passed to the ICC, where was the enforcement? So I've said very clearly that I don't want these investigations to be never-ending stories. But I briefed the council last month and I said, as long as leaders are so, unfortunately, and I'm very sad to say so, they seem so intent on writing further pages of misery and chapters of despair, I will keep looking at the situation, and I've put people on notice that we have jurisdiction in relation to the latest outbreak of hostilities, and we have to make sure we just don't talk. We have to deliver, and I'm trying to also deal with the resource issues to make sure that we can deliver more effectively, because the people of Sudan, the people of Kalma camp that I visited, 30,000 people, it's a very emotional scene when you go there. Kids that have been born in those refugee camps, wearing football shirts that are hand-me-downs from players like Balotelli. I don't suppose you even remember the name. You have to be probably my age. So imagine how many generations, 15, 16 years ago, they're wearing this in refugee camps, and they're still praying that the ICC will give justice. They're still believing the UN will deliver some just peace for them. And the reality, we've all failed. The AU has failed. The ICC has failed. The UN has failed. We need to find new ways. And Sudan has failed. Fundamentally, it's their basic responsibility. Sudan has let its own people down. We have to find a way.
Prosecutor, internationally, the Islamic State, the ISIS continues to, have its threads proceed, but also the ICC and you as a prosecutor have voiced your issues on this matter. What do you have to say about the ICC in itself?
Well, I had the honor, in 2018, I left a very comfortable private practice, and I was the founding special advisor to the Secretary General of the United Nations and the head of the UN team investigating Daesh, which is ISIL, which I call the most un-Islamic state. And I lived 3 years in Baghdad, and there were missile strikes, and it was a tough assignment. And I did so for really two reasons, at least, more than that. Number one, I'm a Muslim. So I feel it's more incumbent upon me to make it clear this is completely contrary to Islam. Islam is a religion whose name is peace. Every greeting, even Kenyans, or I've met so many Kenyans, Jambo, but you also know, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So Assalamu alaikum is peace upon you. And the other person will say, peace be upon you too. How can a religion whose name, whose greeting, and at the end of every prayer is salam, be a religion of hatred? So I felt I couldn't be in my comfort in my home, in one of my homes. I have to be there in Baghdad or in Mosul or in Sinjar with the Yazidis who have suffered so much, or with the Christians that have suffered so much, or with the Shia that have suffered so much. So we see this extremism is metastasizing like a cancer into the lymphatic system. I'm also investigating the Islamic State, Khorasan and Taliban. On a scale, they're also affiliates. They have the same ideology that your worth is defined by your religion, whether you, not even if you pray towards Kaaba, Qibla, but are you the right kind of Muslim? You look at the Sahel region, you look at Mali, you look at Niger, you look at West Africa, how ISIS is moving. In West Africa, look at Boko Haram, who did the allegiance to Baghdadi, the so-called caliph, the false caliph of the Islamic State. And look at Al-Shabaab and you look at Islamic State even next door in Somalia. So we have to find common partnerships again. We need to work together, with all member states of the United Nations, with all state parties of the ICC, with regional organizations, and think imaginatively. Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Let's find new solutions even to old problems. If we do that with sincerity, with fidelity, with partnerships, it may not be perfect, but I always say perfect very often is the enemy of the good. Let's try and be good. Let's try and be better. And to do that, we need conversations and we need to come together.
Finally, Prosecutor, you mentioned social media, earlier on in our conversation, and, Kenyans have tagged the ICC on several issues, especially since the last election. Have you received any requests?
And I said I will not touch on Kenya. I'm recused from that.
What is your outlook or, outline during your tenure as prosecutor? What do you want to achieve or to be remembered for during your tenure as the ICC?
My priority is to serve. In a blink of an eye, I'm going to be gone. And all of us will be gone. If we're lucky, we'll be buried. And we'll meet our maker. So the obligation for all of us is to serve humanity. Whatever you are, whether you're a doctor or a lawyer, whether you're a cleaner, a teacher, a nurse, whatever you do, serve not as a grudge, but try to serve to improve things. What I would like is to serve better. I would like, of course, the office to be more respected. I'd like it to be more effective. I would like there to be more credibility in terms of the cases we bring and better results and more confidence from the victims and survivors that this is a court that is fit for purpose, that is moving from its in a new direction and much more open to partnerships and allergic to competitive relations with national authorities and regional organizations, but rather very open to embracing a collegiate approach to justice, because I think that's what people want. They don't care whether it's the flag of a nation state or a regional organization or the United Nations or the ICC. I think what people in refugee camps around the world, whether it's in Sudan or the DRC or in Palestine or in the Rohingyas or in Ukraine, what people want is a belief that we're not in it for ourselves. It's not all talk. It's not all false promises. And then we go in our air-conditioned vehicles or on our business class flights to another capital of the world and we forget about them. So we need to improve ourselves and we need to be focused on what impact are we giving collectively? Because I think this is a very big issue. Your last question, I think, is the most important. The international architecture that has been created since the Second World War has to reform itself and be seen to be fit for purpose. If things are not renovated, they decay. This is true in a house or in a hotel or in international institutions. They have to adapt to become relevant to the needs of the time. And the world we're in now, look at how advanced the Southern Hemisphere countries have been. So we need to work in this direction to make international architecture collectively deliver more for the people. And I think this requires an approach of collegiality, not empire building. The days of the Caesars of the world or the pharaohs of the world, thank goodness, those people should be in the in the pyramids if they're the pharaohs, or they should be interned somewhere else. This is our obligation to work much more as an international family, respecting independence of mandates, but showing the people who suffer the most and to have